Hello everyone, and welcome back to another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Book of Yokai, Mysterious Creatures and Japanese Folklore by Michael Dylan Foster. This was a viewer recommendation, so if you recommend a book for me to read and I can order it from anywhere in the state that I live, I will review it. So this was a viewer recommendation, and I am very glad that I got this recommendation to read and review. First of all though, if you're new here, I post new book reviews almost every single day, so if you want to wake up every single day to some new reading inspiration, feel free to stick around. As a little bit of an overview about this book before we dive into the plot per se and the review, this book kind of bridges the academic and the popular. So the author, Michael Dylan Foster, when you first start reading this book, you're going to notice right away that this is a person who knows what they're talking about. This is someone who spends a lot of time studying this, and they're very well versed and knowledgeable about what they're talking about. However, they want to kind of open up this world to the popular reader who maybe hasn't received as much academic background on these yokai that they have been exposed to through popular media or through other books that they have read. So the author knows that they're trying to straddle the section between academic and popular, so it's just academic enough to not be a popular reader, but it's not academic enough to be so dense and full of technical jargon that the average reader cannot read. The author has lived and worked in Japan, so he clearly has firsthand experience or very close familiarity with the culture and the things that he is speaking about. And very clearly, this is not a book on artistic depictions of yokai. So it's probably one of the most important things to take away. Well, there are artistic depictions of yokai in this. Other books that I have read, such as 100 Japanese Supernatural Beings, which was a book that I read and reviewed recently on my channel, has a heavy focus on the way that these yokai, these mysterious beings in Japanese folklore, have been depicted in the artistic tradition. And this book does not do this. This book talks about the history, the culture they grew up in, things they could represent, and just information about these yokai. So this, while having artistic depictions of these yokai, is not primarily a book about artistic depictions. So that's probably the things you need to know going into this book. The book is broken into two main sections. The first is history, culture, theory of yokai, and that one definitely has a little bit more of an academic ring to it, but it's not, again, full of technical jargon. It's not inaccessible to the average reader. These sections are here in the front. So the first part, the author just calls it yokai culture, but then there is a second part, which is yokai codex. So that is a listing of different yokai. This section, he just literally goes through and has a section for each. Obviously, this is not exhaustive, and this is where some depictions come in, but he does go through different yokai that he would like to include in his book. So he talks about the history, how they've grown up, how they have been integrated into Japanese culture, and also then provides a listing of yokai with relevant information, history, or legends surrounding them in the second half of the book. So yokai, the author is using this term as an umbrella term for spooky or unexplained phenomena or creatures. And so through this, the author has a lot of discussion about liminality, borders, this region. They occupy regions right outside knowledge, so things that you can't quite explain or don't quite know. And when I was reading this book, I felt like that section that talked about the liminality, the borders, the boundaries, the what makes human versus non-human discussion really reminded me of another book that I've read, and the review is on my channel, called Basilisks and Beowulf was the title of the book, I believe, and it talked about how humans have boundaries where everything out there is a monster and everything in here is human or known or we understand this. So having that separation is something that isn't unique to Japanese culture, Japanese mythology, and having these creatures or these things that kind of can either go between that boundary or live in the boundary is something that is not something that we do see in other areas of the world. So I just was reminded of that connection when I read this book, and the author really makes the point that yokai are these interstitial beings that can kind of live or exist in the boundaries between what is known to the people and what is unknown or not knowable. The author also talks about how yokai have existed for so long. So he makes the point that these creatures would not be existing, or they would not be present in the popular culture or the knowledge of the people today if they were not actively being kept alive. So people out there are keeping these alive because they're choosing to keep these alive. And one medium for the continuation of these beings is popular culture. So manga, anime, books, anything that is popular and current is a medium for the continuation of these stories. But because these are living, breathing in the sense that the legends are not set. It's not like someone once upon a time wrote down the legend of a yokai, a particular yokai, and then it can never be changed. By being kept alive, the current artists have some ability to play with these beings, and the stories can kind of continually evolve to keep up with more modern times. So I did like the author's discussion of why the people, or how the people can, what's the word I'm looking for? Through being kept alive, the people also have the ability to make these more modern or incorporate them in their current lives. Also, through what the author is calling the soft power of Japan, the yokai and many of them have spread to other parts of the world. So these are things that are not unique or unknown to people who live outside Japan, because this popular media is able to export the myths and the culture around yokai to other areas, meaning that people who live in other countries such as the US, where I live, are able to have more of a connection or knowledge to these yokai than maybe we would have if these were just like local legends that never made its way into popular culture and weren't being actively perpetuated. So overall, I think this book is a really enjoyable book. I do think that this book is geared for someone who already has an existing interest in the yokai. Maybe someone who has read some books on them before, maybe people who have looked at pieces of art involving them before, but I think this would be a very difficult jumping in point for someone who has no connection to yokai or doesn't really understand anything about them. And I'm not advertising myself as an expert or someone who is well read, but I think most people have a connection to yokai by way of pop culture. That's when most people get exposed to some of this for the first time. I know that's the first time when I've been exposed to a lot of this stuff is through pop culture. So through pop culture, people can be exposed to yokai. Then I feel like they seek out things that are maybe a little bit more accessible, like artistic depictions throughout history of these yokai. And then from there, they can move into a book like Foster's The Book of Yokai, which has a lot more history and detail and theory around the yokai, and it just gives them a broader picture of everything related to these mysterious creatures of Japanese folklore, as the subtitle indicates here. I'm going to end on a personal anecdote. When I was very young, my dad had a book at home, and it was a book he had picked up when he was in Japan himself. He went to Japan in the 80s, and this book was in Japanese and English, and it had a bunch of tales, and one of them was the tale of a man who meets a woman who's crying on the road at night, and then he asks if she's okay, and she looks at him, she's crying into her sleeve, and she like wipes her face, and you can see that there's no eyes. It's like an egg, and the man is scared, so he runs, and he comes across some sort of stall, and there's a man in it, and he explains what he's just seen to this man, and the man says, "Oh, does she have a face like this?" And then he wipes his face, and then there's nothing. He also has that egg-shaped face, and then the light that's in the stall extinguishes. I read that book as a kid. Well, it wasn't like my dad gave it to me to read. I feel like I just found it and read it, and then I became very scared, and this story really stuck with me because it was very scary to little 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old me. I felt like it just had all the creepy vibes, and that stuck with me for a long time, and that story is repeated in this book on page 208, and it's the Nopurabo or Nupurabo. I'm not saying this quite correctly, but the story is repeated in here, and I just remember having that first encounter with this yokai in that book that my dad had at home that scared me so much when I was a little kid, repeated again here. So that was just a cool personal connection that I found in this book. Overall, I do recommend this if you have any interest in the yokai and would like to learn more about them at maybe a slightly more academic level than you have been reading or experiencing them at, or if you've seen a lot of yokai in popular media that you consume, anime, manga, then you might be wanting to take your knowledge to the next level, and a book like this might be a very interesting place to start. So if you have read the Book of Yokai by Foster or anything similar to it that you think I should be reading, please leave your comments in the comment section below. I love to receive them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of